Region X Radio.
And welcome to Region X Radio, right here on regionxradio.com. I am your host, Robert Bruce, joined by the other host, Cindy Brown. Hey there.
Hey.
Am I blasting you out over there?
Did you see me fiddling with
yeah, it's like eardrums. Welcome, guys. Welcome to Region X Radio. Tonight we have a couple of guests. They should be on here in just a few minutes. We have Jake and Mari from Grand Solar Minimum.
Very exciting.
And so, and we discussed this, not like these guys, and I guess you would say, their adeptness in their research. We discuss this all the time, and you know me, I'm skeptical. I'm skeptical, but you've made me look into it.
Well, I've always been interested in the weather and prepping. It's just kind of a way of life. It's not really. There we go.
There it
now
is.
You can hear me. Good Lord. Okay, there's two buttons I'm allowed to touch, and I broke one of them. I was just saying that we've always kind of both had an interest in gardening and prepping and just as a way of life. And I'm always keeping an eye out to the weather and seeing what's going to happen that might motivate me a little. And I ran into their videos on YouTube, and they were talking about a little ice age coming and the solar minimum. And I didn't know anything about it then. And I'll tell you what, it motivated me.
The whole subject is fascinating because where I remember you remember in the 80s and in the 70s when they told us there was going to be an ice age? Then that went away.
Wasn't that, I'm not even sure it was that late. Yeah, that's not that late, is it? I'm just old.
But I remember this. I remember reading a book back in the year 2000, if I'm not mistaken, and 5/5/2000, The Ultimate Disaster. And this guy got into, he was sort of out there, but he got into, Richard Wagner, I believe his name was. He got into that whole concept of a coming ice age. So, yeah, this is very fascinating. We should have these guys on here in just a couple of minutes.
They used to talk about, I remember when they did talk about how we were going to have an ice age, and then it was global warming and the sea levels were rising, and I happen to live on the ocean, and I can see it every day if I want to, and it was not rising.
Hey,
so.
I lived on the ocean for 3 years before I came here.
That's true.
Didn't see any rise there. Didn't see any. So, but the thing is, they keep beating the drums, and you don't know which way to look. We talk about this, all the confusion. They see, my side, your side, all this. So, when somebody does present good research, you do have a segment that's they don't want to listen to it. They're like they've been brainwashed. They see the same thing. It has to get hot. It's global warming.
Well,
it's got to warm up.
There's so much other hype. Remember, they were saying, there's these mass die-offs of animals on the Oregon coast, and none of that was true. We had one die-off, excuse me, and it was the starfish. And they were actually Californian starfish that when the water's warm, when the ocean current is warm, they'll come up here, and the first cold weather, they die, and that's what happened. So that's it. The occasional sea lion, they'd make a big deal about it, or whale, but we really didn't have all those mass die-offs.
Right. So we actually, the weather down in Florida, because it has been different, we had more red tide. For 3 years, there was a big red tide. Then the hurricanes came in. Then I moved here, so I don't know if the red tide came back. But there have been a lot of weather changes that you can watch that are very interesting, extreme. Look at what's going on the Northeast.
Oh, man.
My uncle's up there right now.
Ugh.
Yeah, he's up there working right now. He sent me a picture. I was like, good Lord, man. You're going to freeze.
And that's a good point because bad things always happen at the very worst time. This bad storm hits, and then you lose power, and you have no heat. Can't go to the store. You're stuck at home. Your pipes freeze.
So what do?
That's right.
You be proactive. That truly is what it all boils down to. And guys, whenever you guys feel like calling in, go ahead. We're ready for you. I see they just popped up on Skype. So
There we go. I hear that.
Did I do something wrong? Oh, I got you. And hey, guys, what's going on this evening?
How you doing?
Very good, very good. Is this Jake?
This is Jake.
And Mari's
Here's
here.
Mari.
Hey, guys, I'm Robert Bruce, and this is Cindy Brown. We're here. We're basically the staff here at Region X Radio. So it's really a pleasure, really an honor to have you guys on.
It certainly is. Welcome.
Well,
Thank
we
you.
appreciate this.
It's fascinating. The whole thing is a fascinating subject. Cindy got me into it, and she introduced me to you guys, as well as a few other people. And years ago, right before you came on, I was saying that I read some books back in 1999, 1998, a few things about this, but it just sort of fell to the wayside because, of course, politics takes over. And next thing you know, it's global warming. They distort the whole view of what's going on. They dropped off.
No.
They dropped off. Could it have been me? I ran them off.
I didn't touch anything, so I know it wasn't me.
Let me make sure that we are. Oh, my. There we go. That awful.
Okay. Sorry about that.
Oh, sorry, guys. I didn't know if it was my end or your end.
Sorry about that.
We are totally capable of doing it ourselves.
It's kind of like, for us, GSM, we can't have a normal show unless we have some sort of technical difficulty. So,
Really? This are we related or something here? Because we're
It's contagious.
Mari and I will sit there and pre-plan our live updates. And, okay, we got this. We're going to do that. We're going to click to this. And then we click to it, and then the titling doesn't work right, or the ticker's not working. It's like, come on.
Buffering.
But, yeah, that's the joys of live.
So if you guys would like to tell the listeners, let them know who you are and basically what you do.
Well, I'll start first. My name is Jake Riley. I've been studying the Grand Solar Minimum. Now I'm heading in my second year of looking into this topic. I started out probably a couple of years ago, my fascination with space, and there was a lot of channels on YouTube that were discussing Planet X, and that intrigued me too. But I had the help of a gentleman who steered me in the right direction, and was basically everything that I was looking at, questioned about, it was all related to the sun and the Grand Solar Minimum. So I started really looking into this about a year and a half ago, and was kind of skeptical about this because, like you said, we've been taught about global warming all our lives. That's the only excuse that we get for why the weather is so crazy. And so it took some time for me to understand what was going on. But with stuff that I've learned about the Grand Solar Minimum, the science to me makes sense. So it helped me clear up a few questions that I had before about some of the sky anomalies that we were seeing, and our clouds, and just the weird weather, and just the way everything was presented to me. It made sense. So I kind of took off from there. And Mari and I, we've been together for over a year as well, and we worked on another channel together. We still do, WTF Sky. And it started off just being a weekly thing with another colleague. And then after that, we decided to start the channel Grand Solar Minimum on YouTube. And from there, it's pretty much taken off. We've spoke to several scientists. We've had Valentina Zarkova on. John Casey, we spoke with him. David Dilley, we spoke with him. Rolf Witsche, and a few others like Matt Stein and Sasha Dobler. We try to collect as many people theories as possible, because what we found, Mari and I, in the research of all this Grand Solar Minimum, is that everybody that you talk to about this stuff, they have a different theory, a different take on how this is going to lay out. So that's my story, how I got started. Mari, you want to share a little bit?
Well, I wound up, I'm the in-house skeptic when it comes to everything we do here at the Grand Solar Minimum. At first, when Jake started the channel, I was like, listen, Jake, I'm going to play like devil's advocate and research and bounce stuff out. And, I was a habitual fence sitter on the topic. I didn't agree nor disagreed with anything that I saw until I really started digging into the scientific papers. Things like what Valentina Zharkova's information with her models that are 90% accurate. The more I dug into it and seeing that the tree ring samples, the ice core samples, everything sort of connected and that all the dots were connecting, I was on board. And now there's no looking back. I can't deny the facts on the table that we are going through this process. So mainly at Grand Solar Minimum, what I do is I do a lot of the news reporting. My specialty is more the video editing and graphics, and I do spend the rest of my time just digging through these scientific papers, which are sort of a bear to get through and break down to understand so everyone can, sort of get something out of these very complex papers.
Well, you do a really good job on those videos. I like the little volcano erupting and the crackling noises. and I've learned a lot just listening to your interviews. I don't think I've listened to the Zharkova ones, but I listened to the first ones I heard on your site was John Casey. And I'm 3/4 of the way through the book Dark Winter, and the science is the hard part for me. I'm not a physicist, and you do a really good job. It's really above my pay grade. It's hard to understand, but you do a good job of lining out how it's done and everything. And I'd like to hear a little bit about what you guys think is going to happen and what has been happening.
Well, as you said, a lot of the science, I'm not going to sit here and claim that I'm an expert. Mari is a very intelligent person. She helps me break these papers down too. So from us working together and what we've done so far, we kind of look at John Casey as the foundation of the education of the Grand Solar Minimum when it comes to volcano and earthquake activity. What we're seeing right now with the charts that we've seen, the sunspots, the lower activity in sunspots, the weaker magnetosphere that we are definitely seeing. And I don't know if you guys saw the paper they put out back on the 22nd of February about the cosmic rays becoming worse than what they originally thought, and it's accelerated in their predictions by 10% more than they actually predicted in the first place.
Wow.
So, go ahead.
No, I was just shocked. I didn't realize it was 10%. I thought it was less than that. That's quite a bit.
Yeah, they were calling for 20% increase, and I think it came out 10% higher than what they originally called for. So, and when they first started reporting on this, I remember before they were saying how the cosmic rays increased by 13%. So each time they do this update, we're seeing evidence, and not just on the climate, but you have to be concerned with health when it comes to cosmic rays as well. So, and Mari and I are just getting started on the whole research of what cosmic rays does to the human body as well, because there's so many factors about the Grand Solar Minimum that you really have to take your time and not rush the vetting process. But I think from what we've seen and what we have learned so far, the forecast for solar cycle 25 with the lower sunspot activity, I definitely agree with that. I think this next solar cycle is going to be very, very quiet. I think we'll be lucky to see 50 to 75 sunspots for the entire cycle. We're already witnessing cooling to a certain degree when you look at the tropics, the temperature drop in the tropics. And also Dr. Roy Spencer, he covers this anomaly as well, the lower troposphere temperature anomaly, and it has also been on the decline. So there's so many things out there that you can go to that's scientifically peer-reviewed and is pointing in the direction right now that we are in the beginning of a global cooling cycle. And, there's signs all over the world with our climate right now that's indicating not just the snow, but the bizarre behavior from the polar vortex and the amount of rain that we saw with Harvey this year. A lot of folks want to say, well, that's because of global warming, all the water vapor from it being too warm. Well, you got to remember, cosmic rays also seed our clouds that also give life to raindrops and snowflakes. So you have to take that in consideration too, that we've got more cosmic rays in our atmosphere than ever before. Plus, Harvey did sit over an area for 2 or 3 days, but still, I do believe that cosmic rays are a big, big responsibility of why we're seeing the rain bombs and these bombogenesis snowstorms.
Well, our weather's certainly been a little severe out here. We hardly ever even freeze, and we've frozen pretty good and had a couple of weeks of where the temperatures were right around freezing and just tons of rain. Now, that does happen here sometimes, but it's unusual compared to the last 10 years. You know, you watch the jet stream, and it usually comes on us, and it hasn't been. It'll go over us, and then we kind of dry out, and then when it does hit us, anything can happen because it's not unusual for us to get a foot of rain in a day, and if that turns to snow, we're in trouble here.
Well, and that's the thing too. You got to where we live in northeast part of America, with the snow and then the rain and then the warm up and then the melt, and now you're talking about flooding everywhere. And I know we had an early problem with this in December. It was cold. We were getting February cold here in late December through early January. And then we had a fall where it reached 60 degrees in Buffalo. And all that snow and ice, I mean, we had 3 to 4 weeks of snow and ice everywhere. And all of a sudden, just everything, ice jams, floods. We had at one point, there was firefighters, police officers, and people from the gas company knocking on everybody's door in our street because we're next to a river. And I guess a lot of people were getting water in their basements, and they were checking on everybody, making sure that the water hadn't reached too high and the gas was still on. And I mean, it was a serious situation. So, Mari's the one that can speak about Buffalo weather, though. She's been here for 20 years, and she said she's never seen the type of flooding that we've had so far.
I actually was calling this flooding how many months ago?
Back in September.
So back in September, just being a local here and knowing how things go, I was looking at the rivers and creeks in the area. I'm like, these are way too high. I'm like, if they're this high now, just wait till I was saying at the time till this spring. And, with this grand solar minimum, the climate goes from one extreme to the next. Some people want to classify it as just cold, but it's a regional effect. So, we're going to have wacky weather everywhere. What was the temperature when we had that 20-degree drop, Jake? Wasn't it like a 20-degree drop or something? Was it 16-degree drop? Remember, we were watching it go down on my car?
Oh, we had a storm. Actually, it was right after we had the thaw. We had a storm coming, another snowstorm, and we watched the temperature drop from, I think it was 54 degrees down to 44 degrees within, 15 minutes just from driving around town.
It was freakish.
I mean, that's the kind of weather that's not normal in most places. So, I mean, people are experiencing that in all parts of the country and the world as well, not just here in the Northeast.
That caused the flash freezing of the creeks and the rivers,
Yep.
which then caused the ice jams and then the flooding.
Yep.
Well, that kind of happened here, too. We had a couple of weeks, like I said, where it was about freezing at night. And,
Right.
and then it was 40, 45 during the day, and then we warmed up. It was 72 degrees yesterday.
Yeah, back in December, I moved here from the Gulf Coast. The day I left from the Gulf Coast, it was 80 degrees. And wasn't it like 20? I think it was 28 degrees was the high for a few days when I was checking the weather the next week.
Down in the Gulf?
Yeah.
I remember that.
That's unreal.
Yeah, I had neighbors where I lived down there that sent me pictures of because the water's warm down there. Even in the winter, it's decently warm and just huge ice fog and mist coming off of the Gulf and all the lakes.
Yeah, the storm chased him all across the United States.
That's right.
We're like, don't go to the mountains. He goes, I'm going to the mountains. He gets here, he's like, I shouldn't have gone that way.
We'll just make up stickers and call it Blame Bob every time something weather-wise happens. We'll have bumper stickers that says Blame Bob.
Blame Bob. So, do you guys see an ice age coming?
Well, see, that's where the research that we've done so far, we've seen so many papers conclude that the 2050s and after, they are looking at this our planet heading into an ice age. We talk about how these cycles are natural, so people are like, well, what's all the hubbub about it? Well, there's going to be some challenges with this minimum, and even though it is natural and it happens every so often, every 200 years we have one of these big minimums. But with that being said, ice age, a lot of our research leads to that. A lot of folks think that we're going to be in a cooling period for 100 years. I know John Casey, if I'm not mistaken, his prediction was 400 years. We've got people who are studying the eddy minimum who think that Earth might be in a cooling period for 1,000 years. Of course, we don't have to worry about that. We won't be here, of course. But with what we've done so far and what we've read and what we know and how we see things accelerating as fast as they are, so far, if anything, they're underdoing it as far as the forecast for what's coming.
I find a lot of the news outlets sort of play it down. They're like, well, we're going to be, cooling, but that'll be offset by global warming. No problem.
I noticed that.
I'm very like, is that just like, are we just easing into it? What are the facts? Now, when you look at what scientists have done with research with the sun's magnetic field and reconstructing geological and historical data of the ice cores and tree samples and everything, I mean, they've reconstructed like the Maunder minimum, and they could tell what the climate, there's historical records everywhere, and it's proven that the reduced energy from the sun, once it sets into a motion, it sets into a sequence of events of, crazy climate affected by the thinning of the stratospheric ozone layer, and then that thinning changes the temperature structure of the stratosphere, which then changes the dynamics of the lower atmosphere, and everything sort of goes from there with the wind patterns, the jet stream, everything. I mean, with this polar vortex that was affected by the glaciers melting, everything is so complex when you start digging into the information. But bottom line is, when you look at all these papers, if you grab like 10 of them and look at them and sort of stack them up, they all point to the same type of time frame where within the next 3 decades, let's say, just to be vague, we're in for significant change, and that's going to affect food supplies and life as we know it.
Yeah, that seems to be the most drastic thing, is the fact that food, we can really adapt and live without a lot of things, but food, not at all, man. So that's where my concern. And Cindy, how will we grow food? What will be the concepts that we use in this kind of cooling? So, go ahead.
Yeah, that's a lot of people who are trying to prep now are starting their gardens, but I really think that the time for starting a garden is come and go. It's time to start thinking about growing indoors or building a greenhouse. I'm in a bunch of global cooling groups throughout Facebook, and there's an individual who's very helpful when it comes to gardening, and he's worried sick right now. His prediction, things should have been in the ground 10 days ago in his book, and there's no way in most parts of the United States right now that can happen. So I think, I used to hope and pray for a soft landing, but for the last 2 years, especially last year, we've seen the crop loss get worse. 16 was just the start. 17 got a little bit worse, and there's no denying it. You look all over the world.
Hey guys, we're right up on the break, and we'll be right back here in just a few minutes. Hey guys, make sure and keep tuning in. Right after the break, we have Jake and Mari from Grand Solar Minimum. We shall return.
Region X Radio. Region X Radio.
I do not know what happened there.
Yeah, kick over the power strip, start to get the hiccups. What's next?
I really don't know what it's like. We had an intro clip play, and then an outro just like followed it right out. It's like, wait, something just sounded to you. Heard it too. It's like, something's wrong. Welcome back to Region X Radio, guys. www.regionxradio.com. And tonight we have Jake and Marion from Grand Solar Minimum. Make sure and go to their website and check them out. They're grandsolarminimum.com, as well as all of their. I believe you guys have all of your social media connected there and your YouTube channel.
Yeah. If the site's working now. I think it is working.
Mari's done a wonderful job with grandsolarminimum.com. She's made it to the point where when we do some of our live updates, I don't have to navigate through all the internet. I just go to our website. I got the radars that I want to look at, weather maps, space weather news, blogs, a forum. So Mari's worked pretty hard on getting that together so people can kind of that's a spot where everybody can get together and just throw some ideas around and help each other and find solutions for this upcoming Grand Solar Minimum.
And I wanted to apologize to you guys. Our breaks are on the top of the hour, and I didn't mean to talk over. I'll talk over you going out there.
No worries.
So we were talking about food and the concept of how are you going to feed yourself. You said that a lot of people are getting into the idea of going indoors.
Yes. Well, and what I've learned, too, here at the 40 latitude and above, we're not going to be able to grow very much once we get into the peak of this. And I think we're already starting to see some evidence of that now with some of the freak weather that we've had. I know spots in Idaho, I've heard that seeds were rotting in fields and throughout the spring because the conditions were not right for these plants to get going. So, yeah, indoor growing to me would make more sense. It's a controlled climate. And like I said, build a greenhouse, or maybe you have the space in your home or dwelling wherever it is that you live. But I really think that we're going to benefit more if we can adapt and start learning how to grow indoors.
Well, that's interesting. Usually we have peas here about 6 feet tall by this time of the year. And I didn't put them in because I was like, it was still kind of wet. And then we had that long cold spell. And if I had planted them, they would have rotted in the ground as well. And I did listen to you talking about how we'd have to grow things indoors, and I kind of wonder about that, because if this thing happens, we could, and it's that bad, power could be really expensive if it even exists. And, we're real close to that line too. And I kind of think that we don't know exactly where that's going to affect what area. You have a general idea, but you don't know for sure. And I know that the last ice age just south of us, where the Kalmiopsis is in southern Oregon and northern California, it actually survived the ice age because they had plants and things there that weren't anywhere else on the earth. Now, of course, most of it burned this year with our forest fires. But it is possible. I mean, maybe things are different and it's tilted, but how do you grow indoors, looking at towards you might not have the power or the supplies that you would normally have?
Well, and I think that's where we have to get creative and think outside the box. I'm not an expert at growing indoors, but and I've had the same concern too with the power issue. A lot of folks are saying that building solar panels and having those to sustain power. But what really concerns me is that with the TSI dropping every year, and if you go look at the TSI numbers, they are steadily declining right now. Are we going to have enough power from our sun to charge up these solar panels? So now you got to think about alternate ways of energy.
We're going to have increased cloud cover as well.
Well, yeah, you got to factor that in with the cosmic rays helping with that situation. So I think there's a number of things. I know aquaponics is something that intrigued me when I first started doing my research on growing indoors. And to me, I need to do more studying on it. But the aquaponics system is what I believe is probably going to be one of the easiest ways as far as getting over that hurdle with your power situation. But there's so many factors to this situation. And you're right. The biggest thing is, though, what happens, because with the weak magnetosphere, and if we happen to get some freak Carrington type event between now and 2030, what will that do to our power grid? How long will it take us to get back online? look at the folks in Puerto Rico. Now, I know that's a poor excuse or a poor example because there's a couple of factors why Puerto Rico is not back online yet. A lot of it has to do with the infrastructure of their company or their country, their government's not keeping up with preventative maintenance like they should. But then also, we've never seen a storm with 150-mile-an-hour winds that just took out an entire territory either. So there's a lot to consider when you're talking about the grand solar minimum.
It's definitely a time where people have to bring their heads together, be creative, share their thoughts, and sort of try to come up with solutions. I mean, when you say, what are we going to do about energy and light sources? Well, then we're going to have to look at edible, low-light foods like sprouts, mushrooms, that kind of stuff.
Was it moringa?
There's moringa.
Moringa,
too.
That's the high protein resource there. So, I mean,
I saw that. Tell us a little bit about the moringa and how that grows.
Again, this is a little bit out of my expertise, but I learned it from an individual on YouTube called Ice Age Farmer. And in the beginning of his channel, when we first had him on, he focused a lot on growing and aquaponics. And he was the one that taught us about moringa. And from what I understand, when you're growing things like moringa, this is not supposed to be a type of plant that is going to like fill you up and make you full. This is something that you throw in with your meals that helps give you the nutrients and the energy that you need so that you can sustain on a light meal. Like, I'm not trying to speak like we're going to be in the dark ages, but if we are, we have to be able to adapt to consume less food.
Yeah, and moringa is protein rich. It has a lot of like amino acids and essential amino acids that contribute to your nutrition, and that's going to be a main thing, like maintaining proper nutrition levels. If I say prepare for the worst, hope for the best. We don't know going forward how bad things are going to get. Maybe they don't get as bad as some people are saying, but I feel like it's worth discussing and coming up with solutions and having people be prepared regardless of what the end game is.
I want to add that nobody really knows, and that's true. The only thing that these solar cycles really give us is something to look at to what happened last time. So at least we can kind of compare what happened last time and compare data from now to then, and that gives us an understanding, an idea whether we're somewhere in between or over or beyond or just equal. Now, from what I've seen, these minimums, I've never seen a minimum repeat itself. It's like a snowflake. They're all different. They're all different in length and how deep they go into. You've got the Maunder minimum, you have the Dalton minimum, which the Dalton minimum was just, it was still cool, but it wasn't as bad as it was in the Maunder minimum, and so on and so forth. So, I keep hearing that one thing reverberating throughout the community is that solar cycle 25 is definitely heading into the unknown.
Well, that's interesting when you talk about that it'll take we may have to get used to eating less food. The reality is, especially if you don't have a big power source, if something happens to the grid, you're probably going to be actually having to consume more calories to keep warm for the amount of work that you'll be doing. But I like what Mari said about how it adds nutritional value, because it's easy to store enough carbs to last for the rest of your life, but not so easy to store nutritious things.
True. And if we're struggling to find food and we're depending on our own, growing and everything like that, it's not like we can just pop a vitamin too. You got to think about that. How long do we, if the grid goes down and it doesn't come back right away, how long do we go without the normal things that we're so used to, like medicine and health products? There's so many unknowns that could happen in this upcoming grand minimum.
Oh, the biggest problem is that society en masse has taken everything that we have right now for granted. So, as food supply shortages and everything else, price increases, who knows what we're going into. I mean, it's really unfortunate for future generations looking ahead. You got so much working against us.
They're the
it
ones
seems.
that's going to suffer the most.
We're in life as we know it is less innocent. It
Yep.
seems like it just gets worse and worse. War, famine, everywhere. I mean, you don't know what's going to strike, but what's important is to have, a couple tools in your box that you can use. Do you know how to grow some basic things to, get some nutrition? Do you know how to, warm a house if something isn't working? Would you have alternate means of providing for your family? Are we thinking outside of the box? Do you have resources, maybe just a couple books to use if the lights are out and you need some guidance? We interviewed a great author named Matthew Stein, and he wrote a book called When Technology Fails. He initially was inspired to write that if there was an EMP attack originally, I believe.
Yeah.
So, say an EMP went out, knocked part of the power grid out or whatnot, and people are out of power. What do you do? I think what we really care about on Grand Solar Minimum is just getting people in that mindset to be ready and to be able to arm themselves and start really thinking about the future. Maybe not for them if something happens, but for their children or going forward. We don't know. We're going into the unknown. And the fact is, right now, a lot of people have taken what we have for granted, and we have to start, acknowledging, what if that didn't, what if that wasn't there? What if I couldn't just walk into a grocery store and grab whatever I want? We have to have a more appreciative mindset. And, I definitely think we have to consume less.
Now, you were talking about the war and these things the government does. If you look at, Cindy, we were looking one day, and you look at the past little ice ages, the solar minimums, you find superstition pop up. It seems that you find superstition start popping up, and people get a little bit crazy. So unlike back, I guess of course it could pop up now, but unlike back then, instead of having somebody to blame, with the technology we have, do you guys see if we started going into an ice age? Couldn't you see the government? Couldn't you see someone in power saying, "Hey, we can do something to heat this stuff up"? Maybe set off, I know it's a little bit crazy sounding, but maybe set off a nuke here, do some hydrogen bomb, thaw some stuff out. Couldn't you see them going just absolutely egghead crazy and doing this stuff?
Little martial law here,
Yeah.
little martial law there.
Gee, I certainly hope not. That would be, to me, I think that would worsen the situation, an H-bomb or something.
Of course.
But it's funny you mentioned the government again, because I was getting ready to say, one thing I like with John Casey, and he says it many times in his presentations, is don't expect the government to come knocking on your door to make sure you've got plenty of food to eat. And he's not trying to scare people. He's being realistic about the situation that could arise from the food shortages that's coming up. But yeah, I could see a lot of craziness, a lot of thinking outside the box ideas to try to get something stable going on with the climate. But the ice age thing, unfortunately, I don't think you and I are going to be alive to see the real challenges of an ice age. It's our children and our grandkids that are going to be the ones that are going to have to be able to adapt and build for the future. Because, like I said, the ice age thing, we're talking about 2050s or farther out. I don't know about you. I'll be in my early 70s by the time 2050 hits around. So by then, we'll either know or don't know what's going on at that point. But like I said, with everything that we've learned and everything that we're studying right now, it's really what we have to do is not so much prepare for ourselves to survive and thrive, but we also have to get this world ready for our children and their future as well. We have to lay the foundation work so they can pick up where we left off.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think that we need to have an eye towards teaching them skills, because
Yes.
you can store up everything and have everything all set up, and something can happen to everything you have. But nothing can take, as long as you're alive, can take away your skills. And as long as you have an idea of what's next if something happens, then you know that you're pretty confident you're going to make it. And really, mental status is everything when it comes to surviving something like that. And chances are it'll be more than one thing. I mean, look, here's the winter and people are losing power because a storm comes. And when you're talking this solar minimum, it seems to me that pretty well encompasses just about every disaster that you could prep for.
Well, and that's a great point. And this, like with everything that we're going through, forget about your battle if it's global warming or global cooling. The bottom line is that what's going on right now, everyone needs to be aware that the climate's changing. Everyone needs to be able to adapt to this situation. Whether you think that global warming's causing it or global cooling's causing it, I think what we're doing here at the Grand Solar Minute, we want to bring attention to the natural cycles of the sun. But we also underline that we want to make sure people are aware of what's going on and how to research for themselves. And Mari was talking about alternate heating and stuff like that, or maybe it was you. Do your research, please, on alternate heating, because there's so many things out there that can get you killed and you don't even know it. Mari and I were actually talking about building some terracotta candle heaters. And so we started doing the research on that, and some of the designs they were showing us wanted you to put 4 of the tea-lit candles. Well, then you research it again, and you find all these videos where if you don't handle these properly, they'll set your house on fire and burn it down in seconds. These things are so hot. And so you have to be very careful when you talk about heating for your home, especially you have to have proper ventilation. You have to make sure that everything's clear away from it. I think there was like a 4 feet, 8 foot rule. You couldn't have anything around it because of the heat it generated. And if you touch some of the parts of these terracotta, what are they called?
I think they're just called like terracotta heaters.
Terracotta heaters. They get really, really hot. So what Mari and I found is that I think we're going to start low. Instead of putting 4 of the tea-lit candles, let's start with 1. See what kind of heat generates from 1. If it's okay, can you put a couple in each room? Would that be enough for you?
And that's a fine experiment. But then my next question is, well, what are we going to have to become candle makers?
Of course we will.
Yeah.
Of course we will. And here's another thing, everybody talks about the solar power. Even if there is enough sun, how long are those batteries going to last? I can't manufacture a battery. It's not going to last forever.
Exactly. Yeah. Lots of challenges to overcome. So, then there's a few people that pop in our comments that have like these crazy like blueprint designs of like Tesla coil, like power generators and stuff. I'm like, I don't know if I can build those or not.
I got friends like that in real life. I can't understand what they're talking about, really.
I'll tell you, the Grand Solar Minimum community is full of people who are very smart. They're very on top of this information. In fact, it's probably true. There is times where we can actually learn from some of our subs. So probably every day we get an idea about how to prep better from one of our subs. And that, like I said, the community that the Grand Solar Minimum, the people that are involved with it, I just think they're a sharp group of people, in my opinion.
Well, I agree, and just the fact that they're listening to try to, that they want some ideas, or they have an idea of what's coming, and they want to be on board with surviving, and
right.
We're not going to do it alone, and we do need to start with our neighborhoods and making sure everybody's going to be okay there. And, when this thing happens, I'm going to be in the Ice Age nursing home. I'm 58 years old,
Right.
So I better hope my children know what to do, because I'm not going to be that active then.
Exactly.
No, and that's like I said, a lot of us here, I think anyone that's born in the mid-'70s and forward, or before that, anyone who was born in 78 and back, we're not going to see the really bad parts of what an ice age will bring. But from here until then, what we've seen this year in 2017 and going into 18, this is just the beginning of it. That's the scary part about all of this. The nor'easters that we've had in 2 in 1 week, 3 big ones so far this season. This is just the beginning of it. And it's not just the snow, guys. It's the heat too. You're going to see extreme heat ups in parts of the world. You're going to see extreme flooding everywhere. And so far this year, I know you guys probably pay attention to the weather. I've checked out your Facebook page, and I know you guys have noticed all the stories this year of the flooding and the wildfires and the landslides and the earthquakes and the volcanoes. And it's not technically 2019 kicks off solar cycle 25, and that's when it's really going to settle into its minimum.
Well, we had quite a hot spell here last summer. I was talking to Bruce when he was still in Florida, and it was like almost 100 degrees. There was no wind at all, in fact, and all of Oregon was on fire, and we live right on the coast. And not only were we getting smoke, all the fires were 2 hours away from us, but we were getting smoke from all of them. And it would come up here, and then it would go back down the coast and go out in the ocean 100 miles and come back in and hit us. And by the time we realized it was this bad, I mean, you couldn't walk outside without coughing. You know, that maybe we should have we don't have air conditioners, nothing like that. It doesn't get that hot. And we realized then maybe we should have had one or an air purifier. So, because the whole house was smoky, it was just inundated. It was really strange. And we couldn't escape it. We couldn't unless we went out on the ocean, maybe.
Yeah, and you know, you talk about fires out there in California. What worries me, not just the earthquakes out there, but you've got all this burnt acreage of areas that were trees and plants and whatnot. And now, you know, we saw those mudslides earlier in the year after we had those bad fires. We got a bit of flooding going on. We saw the mudslides live on TV and everything. And the color, the charcoal color of that the dirt and mud was basically from the burnt trees and everything. But what really worries me the most is the flooding in California with the fact that there are less trees. Now there's going to be more landslides to deal with too. So, you know, Mari and I were talking the other day. I'm not so sure there is a part. I think the only part of the country that I would be okay with, that I can confidently say that you would probably dodge a lot of the craziness of the weather, would be like New Mexico, Arizona, Nevada, like the lower part of Nevada and western Texas. But the rest of the country, you know, our asses are out there in the wind.
Well, literally ours are in the wind right now. And I think you're right about California. I mean, they've already had a lot of landslides, and that's going to happen in Oregon too. We were burnt quite badly, and we tend to slide anyway when we have the dry summers. We don't usually have them that dry that long, and we've had Indian summers. Well, that's not happening this year. We're getting inundated with rain, and our ground doesn't stay very stable in the first place. We're always moving, so just about anything could happen along the coast here, I think.
I'm watching the weather right now in the West, and I'm concerned, especially right around the 10th and 12th of March. You guys are going to get bombarded with system after system, low-pressure systems. California is going to get their share of it starting on the 15th as well. So I was going to ask you, I didn't realize you were in that region. There was a town, I think, called Yakima out there in, is it Washington?
Yakima, yeah, that's in Washington.
What is the status? People were making a big deal about this ridge that was cracking off, but from what I understand, that takes some time to like actually fall. It's not. Is it in danger now, or is this something that just takes years of you know, for it to actually crumble and have like a landslide or something?
Yeah, I saw that. I was watching that, and they told the people they should move, and the people are like, nah, we're not doing it. So maybe they know something we don't, but our land does move. I remember when I was younger, they didn't know Oregon had any faults or there was any in Washington. We thought there wasn't, and we didn't know we had active volcanoes either. And, of course, we suffered that as well. But really, if you knew anything at all about geology, you could go on the beaches and you'd see all these different kinds of rocks that washed up, and you're like, well, looks volcanic to me. And lo and behold, sure enough, you know, we have a volcano below, and oh gosh, maybe the whole Cascadia chain there is active. And, you know, Oregon is just mountains all over the place. We have a coast range. Maybe they are all active. I don't really know. But I do know that we also have a volcano chain in the ocean, and you don't see a lot of talk about that. It isn't just that it's the slip from the plates. There's volcanoes out in the Pacific Ocean. In fact, it seems to me that about 75% of the active volcanoes, I think I was reading, are in the Pacific Ocean. I don't see them marked, though.
No. We have a map, I do believe, on grandsolarminimum.com that shows active volcanoes, but you're right. The majority of them are in the Pacific Ocean. Well, no, really, the majority of them are in the Pacific Ocean. Yeah. So, you don't hear a lot of talk about the volcanoes too, and we should, because we've already had one this year. We think we know there's one in Antarctica that's going off underground. and that's causing some warm up in a region in Antarctica, but nothing too significant. But they think that that's what the warming is causing is from that underground volcano that's going off, or underwater volcano, I should say.
And speaking of Alaska, we actually have a sun there, and he said that it's been pretty unseasonably warm. Oh, we got a break.
All right.
Talk to you in a few minutes.
All right, guys, we'll be right back.
Region X Radio.
And we're back here on Region X Radio, regionxradio.com, with our guests tonight, Mari and Jake from Grand Solar Minimum. Welcome back, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Oh, indeed. Enjoyed it. I have a question. You said that you used to get into the whole idea of doing research on Planet X. Okay, where did that go?
All right. Mari and I actually have a background with, at first, the Planet X theory probably grabbed our attention in the first place. This is how we got to the Grand Solar Minimum. And so we kind of, we followed a few people on YouTube, the things that they were claiming, the correlations with Bible prophecies and whatnot. And, you know, for an average guy who doesn't have a lot of knowledge on how outer space works, some people in the beginning will fall hard for this topic. And I think the more you learn about space and the sun and everything like that, the more you realize that the theory of a planet on the outer part of our solar system, now that I believe, the theory of a planet colliding through our solar system is the problem that I had. And the gentleman that reached out to me was a solar expert. And it took me a while to kind of like, no, you're just a shill. In the beginning, you're just a shill. Stop trying to tell me that, you know.
Well, I think that's the mentality with the whole conspiracy world. It gets sort of, you get yourself stuck in a rabbit hole, and then whoever tells you anything different, it's like, you're not having that. Like, no, you know, I found it funny when I was researching Planet X, there's a lot of people talking about a fake sun. And that drove me crazy because I'm like, what are they talking about? This fake sun? And then there'd be like these pictures of like patents from back in the day, and they're using this sun because Planet X is sucking our sun's like energy away. And I went to the extreme of getting an H-alpha telescope, and that's when I was like, okay, this is all BS. Because what I'm seeing through my H-alpha telescope is exactly like what you'd see on the SDO. Like, I can verify that. So when people are like, oh, NASA's lying, well, at least the SDO I can see and compare with, you know, I can compare what's on the SDO with what I see with my own eyes in my H-alpha, and I can tell you straight up, I don't see an artificial sun simulator.
Mari actually set up the H-alpha for me last summer, and that was the first time that I'd ever seen the sun through a telescope like that. And I'm gonna tell you, it gave me chills knowing that I was looking at the star that gives us all the life that we have on this planet. And it really helps you. It puts your mind at ease, especially when you're out there looking at the sun. You don't see anything in the telescope that's anywhere near the sun. There's no objects near it. You know, that was the thing. We saw the two sun videos. You know, people freaked out, and if you didn't know much about astronomy, then it's possible for yourself to fall into a rabbit hole. And that's what happened to me. But we got pulled out of it. The science of the Grand Solar Minimum lined up with what we thought was Planet X stuff, like the sky anomalies. You got a lot of people who still believe, and I'm not knocking anybody who believe in chemtrails. To each his own. That's your right. You know, if you believe in chemtrails, you have that right. All I'm saying is that I used to believe that we were being sprayed, but the thin white clouds that you always see in front of the sun every day, it looks like wax paper. I always thought that was the government spraying to hide what's by the sun. That's actually cloud nucleation from all the highly charged particles in our atmosphere. So, and that's hard too to explain to people as well who are really, really convinced that we're being sprayed. So actually, Mari and I try to stay away from the whole chemtrailing Planet X theory, just because we know we've been there.
Very controversial.
We understand what some of these folks are going through, and we don't want to insult anybody's intelligence either.
Well, and I think the Planet X stuff, for a lot of people, it's a spiritual journey. You go through it. Some people have prophetic dreams and fall into that subject. Some people, to me, it seems like the majority of the people that stumble upon that topic start off sort of hard into it because of a spiritual, something or other. At least, from my experience.
I'm just amazed that some of these guys these days that are into Planet X also believe in flat Earth. I'm like, what is this? Is this like a tennis game, waiting for a ball to come hit the flat thing?
Earth isn't flat?
People want to argue about flat Earth and stuff, and I just laugh. I'm like, what does it matter?
I saw
what is it gonna change your life or something?
I saw a really funny debunked photo about flat Earth the other day, and it's true. It's very true. But if the Earth was flat, it showed someone's cat trying to knock things off the edge of the Earth, because that's what would happen. All the cats would get together, start knocking things off the edge of the planet. So that's enough debunking for me to know the Earth's not flat.
There you go, Jake. You did it. Flat Earth debunked.
So back to more, because I was just wondering, it's actually Planet X well over a decade ago, probably like 2001 or 2002, that led me into my field of research, which is conspiracy stuff, but more of a logical take on everything that's sort of happened historically. But yeah, I got into the whole craziness too. And then suddenly I was like, wait, this doesn't make sense. Just like you guys were talking about.
Right.
This isn't the physics just don't make sense.
That, and and today I visited some of my old profiles on Facebook, and I don't know if you're familiar with Bob Evans Jr. and his work in the Planet X community. And I was looking at his Facebook page. I used to follow him, and every story that he had posted, I told him, I said, you don't realize this, but you're talking about earthquakes, volcanoes, cosmic rays, extreme weather. I said, Bob, you're reporting on the grand solar minimum and don't even know it yet. And that's a lot of these Planet X channels and websites out there. They think they're talking about Planet X, but really this is all GSM related.
Indeed. That is fascinating. The one side, it's sort of like one side sees the myth and one side sees the logic.
Right. If
you go back and look at in history, there's always going to be those people that have to keep grabbing onto the myths and the superstition. And I guess we're not any different. We're not any different these days, even though we're in this advanced digital age.
Yep.
Indeed.
Oh, I have a question. I think you did a video too, either today or no, it was yesterday, I think, about the solar filament that's going to hit. You said, I think, tomorrow morning. And it seems to me I heard Ben Davidson from Suspicious Observers also talk about that, but I think he said Friday morning. And I just wanted your take on that, what could happen, just to kind of clue everybody in on being careful.
Ben is the man when it comes to that topic. So if Ben says Friday, Ben's right. I am just going off of.
I think he said Friday morning. So
I think you might be right as well. I know coronal hole. When we get Earth-facing coronal holes, when we see them on the SDO, what day you see it on the SDO facing Earth is about 2 to 3 days away from actually hitting Earth. So I'm not well versed with the filaments. So if Ben said Friday, I might have misspoke.
Right. And usually solar filaments don't really do anything to us, right? But right now our magnetosphere, our protection, isn't as much as it usually is, so it could cause something to happen.
Well, Ben's got us in a 3-week 8.0 and up quake watch right now.
Right. I saw that too.
And I don't, these filament releases don't really help the cause of not having these earthquakes, because Look, Mari and I were talking about this before we came on your show tonight. We were talking about how we're going to talk about volcanoes and earthquakes. There's a lot of people out there who believe that it's related to the sun, but they're still trying to find ways to actually prove it. Now, Ben does a really good job with predicting earthquakes, and I think he's got a pretty good system down. I think there's a lot of scientists and people out there that are getting close to figuring out how the sun is contributing to our planet. But with these filament releases, I have to believe that Ben called out this quake watch due to these filaments as well.
Yeah, that could be. And like you said, it does have some health effects, and we don't really know what those all are. We're just learning about how everything's electrical and is affected by that, and we're not sure of the relationship between humans and the Earth and the sun or even other solar systems.
Well, here's what's really shocking. You talk about human health and cosmic rays. This new report is now saying that humans, before this report, we could be in space for 1,000 days. Now they're saying only 700 days. That's quite a bit of a drop from 1,000 days. Now, I know none of us are going to be up in space for that long, but to me, that's impressive. That's an impressive decline to hear that there's too much radiation now for folks to be at the space station longer than 700 days, if they ever had to be, I guess, is the point. But
well, that's kind of interesting. I was watching a thing. Bruce and I were talking about it on the air here last week, I think. Mm-hmm. I was watching a thing about the astronauts, and they were talking about how they had to go through 2 radiation belts to get into space, and they had to wear monitors, and they could only absorb so much radiation before they didn't get to come up again. So they were trying to figure out ways to reduce their radiation exposure. And I always think about that when you guys talk about solar rays and everything affecting us. It's like, well, how do you protect that from that? And these astronauts actually took bags of water and lined their sleeping quarters with them, and that protected them from quite a bit of the solar rays. And Bruce looked it up, and it took 3 inches of water.
It was 7 centimeters. 7 centimeters catches any kind of radiation.
Wow.
So that's something to incorporate. Maybe you could make a safe room or incorporate that into your living quarters somehow.
Or I was going to tell you too that the cosmic ray increase is going to affect air travel as well. So now maybe you have to start thinking about some of these jets being specially lined with this kind of protection, the lined water bags. Who knows? That may be something that they're going to have to do in the future for people to actually be able to fly in planes. I didn't know if you had anything to add.
No, I don't have. Well, I was thinking about the radiation just from the sun, and then I'm thinking just to myself quietly with my little conspiracy theory mind here. Well, we have that, and then all these EMFs that no one acknowledges. I find that funny with all the Wi-Fi networks, cellular towers, all these other, invisible intruders. It's just you look at the effects of that on your health as well. That's what I'm thinking. That's why you see the gears turn, Jake.
The human body is about ready to be put through the ringer here over the next several decades, in my opinion. Not just with temperature, but with the space weather that we're receiving. I mean, my brother was telling me the other day, he goes, I don't get it, Jake. You say that we're cooling, but every time I go outside and it's 30 degrees outside, and my face feels like it's going to melt off because the sun is just, it feels like it's setting me on fire. Well, I had to explain to him, that's the increased UV rays that we're getting right now because of the weak magnetosphere. And it's weaker than we've ever had it before right now, too. So that is the reason why we're seeing situations like that. My where I'm from in Southwest Ohio, a weatherman did a live cast, and he was taking temperature readings from the ground, and he showed the ground that was being beat up by the sun, and it read like 38 degrees. And then he walks over to the shade where there's like a snow pile, and it showed 22 degrees. And he was really mystified at why the pavement was warmer with the sun. Well, naturally, when you're in the direct sunlight, but we're seeing increased UV rays, and that's why it has that increased temperature feeling as well.
Fascinating.
More skin cancer.
Yes.
There you go.
So you were talking about the Wi-Fi and these type of things, and we are so digitally wired in this world. With that kind of, I guess you would say, with those rays, do you think this has any effect on our weather as well?
Jake is not really into that, but
I'm all natural.
He's all natural, but I am very I'm alert to this EMF thing. We're guinea pigs, plain and simple. There isn't enough science that has done testing, but what the science that has been done on EMFs is, it definitely has health effects. People they call it, I guess, EMF poisoning, but the effects are heart arrhythmia, anxiety, panic, sleep disorder, even skin rashes. That is its own whole other spectrum of things that society going forward in the future is going to have to combat,
Yeah, but do you think it's going to affect weather?
Yeah. I do. See, you and I go back and forth in this because there's some people that agree with HARP. There's the chemtrail team, and I'm like the fence sitter that's just sitting there. I'm trying to look at things objectively. Now, EMFs are, when you get into sound, frequency, vibration, you think about the abilities of the human senses. We can only see certain spectrums, and there's so many other spectrums out there that the human senses cannot see. I just think there's a lot of unknown. Sound, vibrations, frequencies, all are a part of EMFs. If we have more particles, I feel like they can move these particles in our atmosphere, and they can be manipulated and that kind of stuff, whether it's natural or unnatural. I think there's a lot of unknowns, and we don't know enough right now, and it needs more research, more honest research from people that can really test it. And I think scientists have their hands sort of tied because the funding only goes to the research that's going to, and the end result is going to be a profit. So will we ever know? I don't know.
Well, this was sort of a two-part question here. If we are going into a solar minimum, wouldn't this, if we really started, temperature really goes downhill, the solar rays, so forth and so on, wouldn't this be the first time in history that you also have these two things, both in the environment? You have the EMF, plus you have what you have coming from the sun.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah,
yeah. I'm crazy. I think outside the box a little bit too much sometimes, but I just wonder. I wonder is the interaction. There's a lot of things that are completely different now, like atomic energy plants. A lot of these things that will just go bye-bye. They won't work too well.
Luckily, we don't have any of those too close.
And and that's the thing. When you hear the argument about CO2 levels are at 400 parts per million right now, and you hear about people, well, that's man-made. And if you look back in previous minimums, the modern minimum, the levels were the same as now. We weren't in an industrial age back in the 1600s. But you bring up a great point. We've never seen this before with the technology that we have. And here's my biggest concern and fear is that all of this technology that we have right now will be completely useless if we do get a Carrington-like event. You always read where if we would have had the technology back in 1859 that we have now, there would have been a lot more problems than what were. So, yeah, you're right. That's something that I don't think a lot of people are thinking about with this future upcoming minimum.
Yeah, I kind of worry about people eating people, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and actually, when you were talking about calories, I have an old cookbook, and it has all kinds of little excerpts about the Oregon Trail and how things were in Oregon way back when. And they said that loggers, the men that did the logging, actually consumed 10,000 calories a day. 10,000.
Wow. What were they eating?
Not each other. Actually, there is a list of I'll have to get it. There is a list of what they fed them, and I kind of know a little bit about that because my grandmother used to be a camp cook at one of these places. She had 4 little girls and lived in a tent up at a logging camp, and they mass amounts of like bacon and flapjacks and just tons of food. it talked about feeding 1,000 guys, and they had meat and bacon and a bunch of pancakes and eggs and tons of coffee and all kinds of things.
I think the grand solar minimum, if anything, people are just going to have to revert to the days where we had to roll up our sleeves and learn how to fish and gut the fish and prepare it for cleaning, for cooking. Same thing with hunting animals. If it gets that bad, if it gets to the point where we're cut off, where we can't get delivery of food because of whether it be extreme weather or crop loss all over the world, whatever the case may be, we may be faced in a situation where hunting, fishing, growing, you're going to have to go back to that.
I agree with that, but then,
trading and bartering.
If you all right, so they were eating good back then, but they didn't have the population that we have now.
No, and you're right. And
out of control.
During the Depression, they almost made some of the game extinct in some areas of the country, and most people were farmers there. They aren't farmers now. I think hunting might not come back for a while. It depends on where you live, but it might not be the answer for everyone.
No, that's true, and I'm one of those people. Unfortunately, the only thing outdoorsy I do would be sports and fishing, and so when it comes to hunting, this is why even though I don't do it for sport or anything out of enjoyment, but it might become a necessary skill that you might have to have. Who knows?
Most definitely, and you might not, your bullets might be too valuable to use, or, if things are really bad, you don't want people hearing where you are, so even more difficult methods of hunting might be necessary.
You bring up a great point, because if we're talking about a period of time where we have to go out and hunt for our own food, we're not going to be living in a period of time where your neighbor's going to knock on the door, hey, can I borrow a cup of sugar? It's going to be, hopefully it's not, but in that time, if you're out hunting and gathering for yourself, and we've had to revert to this, you're right. You're going to have to save your ammunition for other things. It might come down to protecting yourself and your family and your food.
Most definitely. I think everything is really surrounded around your food, because it's necessary for us to survive. It's about protecting it and acquiring it and using it. And, the whole prepping thing, that's just a really economical way to live. Like you said, about consuming less, certainly consuming less of things we really don't need.
Yeah, Mari did a great job with the interview with Matt Stein, and he really opened my eyes. And you see the commercials, too, about how the lady buys the strawberries at the supermarket. She puts them in the fridge. She takes one out one day, rinses them off, eats a couple, puts them back in the fridge. And then they do a time lapse throughout the week where she goes into the fridge several times but doesn't touch the strawberries. At the end of the commercial, they have to throw the whole thing away. That's the kind of stuff that he's talking about, that we have to unlearn those old bad habits and start being more conscious of, when we get to the period of time when we're struggling to find food, you're going to sit back and remember, like, man, remember all that, those fresh vegetables we wasted that one time, or the times that we watered our lawn when we're struggling to find water now, and we wasted it on watering our lawns and stuff like that. I mean, there's going to come a time where you're going to have that dope minute, the Homer Simpson minute, and wish that you had been a little bit smarter and consumed better.
No, for sure. And if you consume better, then your things last longer. And you make a really good point about when you brought up water. People in Oregon don't really think that way. And I didn't always either. I thought, well, I'm not going to have to pack a couple gallons of water if I have to go anywhere, because there's water all over the place. But the reality is, if something happens, the surface water could be contaminated. Certainly with an earthquake, or like when Mount St. Helens blew,
everywhere.
Yes, I was moving from Coos Bay to Bend, which is up in the Cascade Range, and there was a dusting in Coos Bay, and in Bend there was like 2 inches on everything.
Wow.
It was amazing.
You bring up contamination in the water. I didn't even think about that. Water filters are probably going to be useless when it comes to, stuff like volcanic ash and other factors. And I'm worried about, you were talking about nuclear plants and everything. What concerns me as well, and I'm not sure if they've got backup generators for these, but if we lose the grid for a certain amount of time, are we talking about meltdowns here? Are we talking about contamination from these nuclear power plants into our drinking water and stuff like that? So there is so much chaos, and I don't like talking about it, but I think this is one of those things where you have to talk about it because it is a possibility. If the right things happen at the right time, we could be sitting in the dark.
Yeah, I worry just as much about the power plants. And like I said, we're pretty far away from any of them, at least 4 or 5 hours. And chances are the wind wouldn't blow our way. It could, but it doesn't usually. But still, let's face it, that could contaminate the whole Earth. And I don't know all these answers, but I do know that you got to try. No matter what, you have to have that mindset that you're going to make it no matter what, because you might. And if you do, you certainly want some things around, some skills or some food. You want to have things ready.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I don't know about you guys, but we've noticed, and I know we're probably coming up on a break real quick, but this time last year, there wasn't as many people out there talking about global cooling as there is right now. It has increased tremendously over the last year, and now people are starting to hear it a little bit more and are starting to take some things into consideration now.
Well, and you guys, I've listened to a lot of people, and you guys and Oppenheimer Ranch and Ice Age Farmer, you guys are really separate from all the rest. There's a lot of people with a lot of, they don't really understand it like you do. I certainly don't. And you're what brought me to that subject the best. So thank you.
Well, thank you. And, I want to...
We'll be right back, guys. Hang in there, guys. We'll be back for our final segment right here on the Region X radio show. We shall return.
Region X radio. Region X radio.
All right, we're back for the last segment here on Region X Radio with Jake and Mari from Grand Solar Minimum. Guys, just in case I can't get it in before the end of the show, don't forget to tune in tomorrow night. We have David from the Oppenheimer Project. So tune in. We're keeping the same little theme this week, but let's bring these guys back in.
It's a fun week.
Yes, it is. Hey, guys.
Hello.
Hey. Yeah, everybody in the Grand Solar Minimum community brings their own thing to the table. And at this point right now, as long as we're getting awareness out about this, that's really the most important thing, because not everybody's going to be like me, Mari. Not everybody's going to be like Oppenheimer or AICH Farmer. Everybody's wired differently.
Indeed.
And people prefer different things for their information, and that's fine as long as those guys are able to communicate with their audiences and they relay the message that the Grand Solar Minimum is definitely going to be an upcoming challenge that we're all going to have to adapt to.
So going back to, I was talking about the times that you can read in history where we started going into these things and you had superstition pop up. And it takes me back also, I was looking at different events that happened throughout history after Cindy sort of started enlightening me to, what was going on with this. And I looked at the Templar Knights and the fact that a lot of the superstition came out about these guys as well as their persecution as we were entering one of these things.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say some of the witch trials, a lot of these things, the French Revolution. Do you know that they had a famine and crop failures during that year, during the French Revolution? So I'm like I said, I'm sort of a logical conspiracy theorist, and it's interesting to look at these events and you can start putting things even more in perspective of why they happened.
Well, you look at China, and they're probably the ones that really noted their history the most, and they lost a dynasty, and they're talking about that people over in China are building cities and preparing. They're preparing for this Grand Solar Minimum. I guarantee you that if anybody has lost the majority of civilizations throughout time due to these minimums, it's the Chinese, and so they know what's coming. So do the Russians. I just wish our government here in the United States would get on board. That way people have a fighting chance of keeping things going. if we do have a grid failure or a famine type situation.
No, that's for sure. I think our government is doing everybody a disservice here by doing that. And the Chinese have better records than we do. I believe the Russians do too. I think that's pretty interesting.
Our government should be synonymous with disservice.
Well, it's nobody's going to come save us. We have to be big people, responsible adults, and say, we may have to take care of ourselves, so we better figure out how to do that.
And I think that's what the government wants, really. I think they just want people to be more self-reliant because they know they can't handle this on this scale. It's going to be too large. And like you guys said before in history, Mari, the civilization, the population is so much bigger. This is going to be a one-of-a-kind type solar minimum.
Well, if that's true, then why are they making more regulations? For instance, in Oregon, we can't even use our own wells or water without testing it and doing all these things that makes it more expensive than even being hooked up to city water. So, they kind of seem to be working against that, at least over on the West Coast.
No, that's Mari.
There's some territories that have made it illegal to even collect rainwater,
Yep.
which I think is absolutely absurd.
Right here?
Yeah, we can only collect off the roof about 50 gallons or something like that.
Yeah, don't dare try to build a pond on your land.
Right.
We're lucky in Buffalo. They actually give rain barrels out to people to collect rainwater, which I find weird because we're not like a drought-ridden area,
No.
but
No.
we have that program in place where the city you can apply to have a rain barrel like delivered to your house. I have 2 in my backyard.
Nice. Another thing they've done here is we can't build earth houses. I mean, we can if we want to pay all these engineers to do all this work. And, by the time you're done, it's more expensive than, a mansion. So nobody's going to make an earth house. I mean, we can't we have to start locally and try to make sure that these things don't happen. It's a struggle, but they're not going to go away by themselves, these stupid regulations and laws.
No, and you're right. It does seem like that they're working against us. There's a guy in South Carolina a couple of years ago that he's getting an eviction notice off the land that he owns and the trailer that he lives in, but he has his own form of power and he has his own water source situation, but South Carolina says you can't do that here. You have to hook up to utilities.
There was a lady in southern Florida, the exact same thing.
It's awful. The unfortunate part is that the people that we talk about, like, building solar panels and all this stuff to get ready for this minimum, I think the majority of that building is going to have to come when things are kind of where people aren't looking at the regulations as much. And that's going to take, unfortunately, a system to fail for us to be able to get away with those things that are so heavily regulated.
I'm afraid you might be right about that. When something happens, there will be no more regulations.
Isn't that history anyway, though? When the poop hits the fan, people sort of say, "Yeah, that law." Sorry.
Well, there is a silver lining to every cloud.
Yes,
True.
Speaking of history, if you want a good resource of a historical record, we recently interviewed Sasha Dobler. He is the owner and blogger of Abrupt Earth Changes. I'm going to have his interview up. He has put in so much work. He wrote a paper called Black Death. Actually, it's an ebook that's free called Black Death and the Abrupt Earth Changes of the 14th Century. It's a great historical record. Just to sort of review of what people went through back then. And he transcribed a lot of it from Russian historical records, and it took him a while. We should probably, I think, do we have that link on our site? People could...
I'm going to look for it.
No,
I'll send it to you after if you want.
Oh, thank you. I would love that.
Yeah, we're research nerds here.
Record. Amazing historical record, and he is working on another book. Just another fantastic researcher in our community.
Now, he's not saying with every minimum there's going to be a plague, but he did find some interesting connections with grand solar minimums and plague.
Well, and it only makes sense that when people are malnourished and don't have enough sun and maybe they don't have heat or all those things, that because they're spending all their money paying for their food, that illness is going to come from that. And I think you're right. I've seen those connections as well. And, I think that people sell themselves short if they think, oh, how are the doctors going to be able to handle us? Or we're going to have a doctor? Because, doctors have never managed to overcome. They wouldn't have cured the plague then. They'd have just done worse things. And I read a story about this nurse when we had the Ebola scare that the hospital was ransacked and she had no more work. So she went home and took care of a sick family member. And all she had was garbage bags and some water. She didn't have IV supplies or anything. And nobody died in her family, and she took care of them. And it didn't go through everybody else. So there's always hope. Don't sell yourself short. You can always try to, get a few of the basics, and it just takes some attention and some careful thinking about contamination to overcome some of these things.
Agreed.
Definitely.
And all medicines came from herbs. You just have to learn those and learn to grow them and store them.
Yeah, that's one of those things you have to be versed in going into this and going into the unknown. Know what natural remedies are out there. Basic first aid skills to, having a book that identifies medicinal plants, edible plants, and all that.
While we're on the subject of medical, I got to be honest with you. The only thing you talk about silver linings, the only silver lining for me for the grand solar minimum, if we do come up to a situation where we have to scale back on the food that we consume, I'm a type 2 diabetic. So I rely on pain medication for neuropathy because the diabetes that I have is uncontrolled. And when we get into a situation where we're running out of food, that's going to be my saving grace for my health, is that my blood sugar naturally is going to be low. I'm not going to be able to sit around and eat a bag of Doritos or a Snickers bar.
Diabetic who loves sugar. So.
Well, and there are plants that have inulin in them, and actually there are recipes on the net for making injectable insulin from animal material, but it looks quite difficult, and of course, how long is it going to last without refrigeration and things like that?
And I think, like me and other type 2 diabetics, we have high blood sugars. So consuming more food is a big part of that as well. And when you consume less, your body, I can still produce my own insulin. So my body is going to adjust itself if I cut back on certain foods and stuff. So I have seen my blood sugars be normal in a period of time. Maybe I'm working a lot of hours and I'm not eating like I should be, but my blood sugars will stay low because I'm not eating all that food like we do now. Who's to say in 10 years from now, we're not going to be eating 3 meals maybe. It's possible you eat a good breakfast and a good dinner, and you might have a piece of fruit for lunch.
Well, that might be true, but still, if you're doing all that work, you're not going to survive long like that.
No.
And some of the things I always think about when I think of long-term making it, long-term survival, the difficult thing is fats, getting enough fats.
Yeah.
Because you can have rabbits and chickens and grow your own food and catch fish, but, how are you going to get enough fat? That's going to be a difficult one.
When you talk about fish and chicken, that's high in protein. We know what protein does. It synthesizes, burns fat that's already stored. So you're right. You're going to have to find a new way to consume fat. And again, we're just going to have to think outside the box.
That's for sure. Well, maybe that's why they used to use seeds in the wild. And that's another thing. Not only are medicines local everywhere that grow naturally. There's things everywhere that you can learn to use that are wildlife plants. And when I find them, I try to make sure I plant a couple in my own yard or across the street in our garden so that I don't have to go looking for them. If something happens, I have them right here.
That's a good idea. That's actually something that everyone should probably do.
And really, your food is your medicine and vice versa. There's not just medicine in plants, there's nutrition and enzymes. And, they used to do that in the old days, go and just get like the leaves off of blackberry bushes, like about now when they're starting to sprout.
Right.
And things like that, because you could get nutrition out of them and different enzymes. And that's why they grew the greens, because it was a spring tonic, probably their first fresh food they'd had all winter. So revisiting that kind of stuff. But those people are dying that know about that.
Right. And what we're trying to do here too with the Grand Solar Minimum education is that people, the more you know, the better you will be when the situation arises, because this stuff is going to be in your head. You're going to remember what you've been reading about. Maybe you've watched instructional videos on how to plant or how to build. There's just so much information out there. I hope people take advantage of every avenue of source that comes to you that talks about this subject when you're dealing with food shortages and climate change and adapting. It's very important right now that while we can, because like I said, I hate to sound like a fear monger, but while we can have access to electronics and internet and stuff like that right now and be able to communicate like on radio, we need to suck it in as much as we can, because if that grid goes down, who knows? It might be 7 months, it might be 7 years, it could be a decade before things come back.
And depending on how it's dealt with, it could be never.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Not in our lifetime. And you make a good point. It's a good idea to develop those skills, even if nothing were to happen. But let's face it, something eventually always happens.
Well, like I said, this year alone, just look everywhere. Mari and I were watching the flood coverage when it first started raining really bad and the Ohio River was flooding in Pittsburgh. And then the next day, another river was flooding. And then, within a 3 days period, like an entire part of the United States is underwater. And I looked at Mari, I was like, it's flooding here. It's flooding in Europe. This is not just isolated events. I mean, how can people – I hope the weather headlines is starting to grab people's attention about what's happening on our planet right now, because I'm only 40 years old, but I have never in my life seen so many extreme weather events happen in just the last 2 years alone.
I'm 46, and I haven't seen this many weather events happen like it's been happening, the frequency.
Well, I'm 58, and the one thing that I'd never seen before was here, was it 5 years ago? When it snowed here in the first week of June. It never snowed. I mean, we don't even get snow every year.
That's scary.
June. I'm like, what?
All it's going to take, guys, is another big volcano anywhere, a big one to happen like Tambora in 1815. And that possibility of a year without a summer is right back on our plates again.
So what do you think about – oh, go ahead. Excuse me.
There was on nature.com, volcanologists are sharing an article on Twitter, and I stumbled upon it and shared it, that a VE17 volcanic eruption is a possibility in the near future. Now, near future could be now or 100 years from now, but we're due, essentially, for a rather large volcanic eruption that will give us a summer without, or a year without a summer. So,
in regions, not everywhere. It's not going to be a global thing where the entire world goes without a summer, but it will happen again.
And what will that do to the global trade, communications, financial systems, all that? I mean, we live in such a complex system now. It doesn't take much to throw things off course. See, I got water here.
We have coffee. Coffee's so strong it should be illegal.
Where'd you buy this?
We drank some the other night, and we stayed up till like 4. We're like, what is wrong? It's the coffee.
That's what keeps Mari and I actually every morning from probably 7 in the morning until 1 o'clock in the afternoon. We're drinking coffee,
first thing on
researching,
my mind.
making videos for our channel, building content on our website. Coffee is the lifeblood of this research.
What are we gonna? Can we grow coffee here?
We should grow.
Yeah, I know. I think about that too, sweetie.
What are we gonna do?
We get a lot of people asking us, well, what are you doing? How are you preparing? And you almost have to take a leap of faith in the unknown, and just, you have to arm yourself with knowledge. I'm afraid to set up anything locally here, because I don't feel I'm in an area where I can have a permanent resolution.
No.
Like if I started a root cellar, this year it would have been flooded and rotted. So, when people talk about how do you prepare, what are you doing? I think right now is you need to arm yourself with the knowledge of just, get some good prepper books, learn about hunting, fishing, first aid, medicinal herbs, be armed with that knowledge, because you might get flooded out. You might have everything you own taken away. Look at the hurricanes, look at the tornadoes. I mean, you have to sort of learn to be resilient and fearless and just arm yourself with knowledge. I mean, that's pretty much people who are prepared for anything, whether they have everything taken away from them or not, are going to be the people that survive, the fighters. There really is no 100% golden seal method to survive.
Yeah, there's not a secret formula out there.
There's too many unknowns. We have too much working against us, and you just sort of have to have that faith in the cosmos that you're going to be prepared and you're going to take it upon yourself to give yourself the knowledge to be okay.
Let me ask you, are they talking about this I know, like you say, not this country, but are they talking about this in other countries? Are they talking about it in the media in other countries?
Russia, China.
Yeah, they are. I think places like Germany and Russia and the Chinese, those areas I know are preparing for this cold epoch that's coming.
Well, I was wondering in their media. Are they starting to push this line, or are they still hanging on the whole global warming thing?
We actually did, and we posted a video. I don't know if you saw it or not, but we posted a video on our channel a few weeks ago where Sky News in Australia actually did a piece on their weather report talking about that this upcoming solar cycle is going to bring Maunder minimum type weather conditions for our climate for the next several decades. So we are starting to see this coming out in other areas just besides here in the United States. But Sky News, Australia, that to me, that's about as mainstream as I've seen it so far. But they actually acknowledged and said that we are going into a mini ice age.
Wow.
So if you haven't seen it, you can go to our YouTube channel. I think it's got the thumbnail's got a little minion from the movie Despicable Me, and it says "Say what?" And this guy in Australia is telling people to prepare for a mini ice age. And it was mainstream news outlet, Sky News.
I think it's funny how the media is with this topic, because it started off with NASA a couple years ago saying, was it last year? They're like, they put out the solar minimum.
The minimum,
video.
yeah.
They're just like,
not the gram, but the minimum.
So here's the solar minimum NASA video. And then, slowly but surely, it trickles out. And now I believe I shared an article not long ago where they're like talking about, yeah, we're in a minimum, but don't worry, global warming will save us all. And it's not going to affect us. And that's the game we're playing now. It's
I hope they're right.
Slowly easing people into conceptual ideas. And now, I feel like eventually they're going to be weaned off that as the reality sets in that, hey, we're cooling and things need to change if we're going to adapt to this as a society.
I don't know about you guys, but I wish global warming was actually happening, because halfway through this winter, I was pumping gas and I'm thinking, I don't want to do this for the rest of my life. This is too cold. This is crap. So I hope those global warming people are right. But based on what we've seen in our research and who we've talked to, I'm going to have to disagree with the whole global warming and how it's going to keep us from getting into a cooler climate, because it's not. It's not going to be enough to offset anything.
And history simply shows that it happens over and over.
Yep.
We got to learn from our past. And if we can't do that, then I guess that's our own fault. We got to be smart about this and not let politics skew reality. And we got to be objective, and instead of fighting whether we're warming or cooling, just to me, I'm just like, hey, it's a natural cycle.
Yep.
Let's just adapt.
It's happening.
Let's not fight about if it's called warming, cooling, climate change. Let's not try to label it. Let's just say, hey, things are weird. Let's adapt. Let's come up with solutions.
Well, guys, in the last couple of minutes, I'll give you the floor. If you want to go ahead and plug your website, plug your YouTube, give everybody the links on here and where they can find you.
Well,
we're on YouTube, we're on Twitter, we're on Facebook.
YouTube, we're the Grand Solar Minimum.
Yep.
If you just type in the Grand Solar Minimum channel.
On YouTube. Twitter, we're Grand Solar Min. Minimum was taken.
I think the easiest venue would be to go to just thegrandsolarminimum.com, where
our website.
Pretty much all the links are right there. Jake usually has news articles he shares and posts, and we also post our videos on that channel as well.
But we also provide the research tools that we use to get our information, like where we find TSI, where we find sunspot information, where we find solar proton flux information. Everything is on, really, you're right, Maury. If you just go to the grandsolarminimum.com, you will find not only links to our social media websites, but you're going to find links to Dr. Roy Spencer, his project. You're going to find links to like places like watchers.news. David Dilley has a website. Piers Corbin is on our website linked. So, I mean, there's a lot. I really feel like, and I'm not saying this because it's my channel, it's my website. I'm saying this because I feel like we built this website for people to do their own research. Don't take our word for it. Look for yourself, because that's what we did. And that's what convinced us that we are in a grand solar minimum right now, is by doing our own research and not listening to what everybody else is telling us. But we were pointed in the right direction, and I think Mari and I are pretty confident in the answers that we found right now. So thanks again for having us on your radio program.
Oh, indeed.
Marty.
Yeah, it's been a total pleasure. Thank you guys for having us on and sharing your
So
thoughts.
much more we could talk about, too. I mean, we could probably go on for 6 more hours.
Well, I was going to ask you guys, would you be willing to come on again sometime? You know, it's not like this is just a solid topic. This is a constantly progressing thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and we
Absolutely.
cover all sorts of different topics. So,
We'd love to come
Yeah,
back.
there's no one and done. This is an ongoing thing, too.
Things change every day.
And we
it
learn
really
more
is.
stuff.
But like I said, things are changing daily now. And last year and the year before, it was kind of like a monthly thing, and now it almost feels like it's a daily thing. Things are changing.
Yeah, anytime you guys do want to come on, too, if you have something special you want to say, just let us know.
Sounds
Wonderful.
good.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Indeed, Jake, Mari, we enjoyed it. Thank you, guys.
Great. You guys have a great night. Thanks for tuning in.
Thanks. All right, guys, we will be back tomorrow, 7 p.m. on the Pacific Coast with David from the Oppenheimer Project. And so until then, oh gosh, I thought we were already on break. You know how I do. My mind's all untimed and everything. But make sure and go and check out grandsolarminimum.com, grandsolarminimum.com. We've been there. Great looking website, and they're right. You can
Lots
pretty
of
much
information.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy asking them what their other stuff is, because that's a pretty good hub. It leads to all their stuff. So, guys, thank you very much for coming on, and don't forget. Also, well, I'm not going to say Friday's guest. We don't know yet. He said
sure.
He said, yeah, but you don't get back, and it's kind of crazy. You're like, when are you going to get back to me about the interview? You start feeling like, what am I doing? How am I acting about this? But
Like a bunch of dates.
or I quit then.
Oh, you chicken.
But hey, where did the break music go?
It's time. It's time for the break
I
music.
know,
Mr. Button Pusher.
technical difficulties. We'll just do it like that. All right, guys.
Good night.
Take care. Hey, and don't forget, this show will go in, it'll play again here in about a minute on the site. So until then, take care and peace.